What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined by another Connor tonight. It's been a few months. Connor Hughes, SNY, back on. Zach Wilson's been traded. It's draft week. We have a few things to talk about here on a special Monday night, Tuesday morning, depending on when you listen. Drop. Connor, how's it going? Getting some rest in before the draft? It's almost time.
I don't know. I mean, you're several years in front of me in the dad department, but I don't know how much rest you can actually get when you've got a newborn in the house. I guess not technically a newborn anymore. She's 10 months old. But I'm enjoying kind of the little bit of the lull here before the draft on Thursday night, because that's always a wild weekend.
So the Jets finally have been able to get rid of Zach Wilson. I think the terms are even slightly better than I expected. They effectively move up from the 7th round to the 6th round, pick swap. Seems like Denver is eating about half the money, which is a win, I think. And, this is a relationship on both sides that needed to end. Denver, considering their quarterback room, I don't necessarily think is a shocking destination. And just having this be something that we don't have to talk about anymore, or the team doesn't have to talk about anymore, feels like a win. And getting anything for him, even a slight increase in a day 3 pick, I think that's a victory. Were you surprised by the terms? What do you think the general sort of sentiment around the building is on this just being complete? And what do you think comes next for this quarterback room? Is a developmental quarterback on the way to sit behind Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised. I mean, there was no world here where Zach Wilson was going to be on the Jets roster this coming season. It would have been toxic. It would have been bad. Zach Wilson was done with the Jets. The Jets were done with Zach Wilson. Basically, Robert Saleh sat him down when they benched him the first time last year and said, "Hey, that's it. Thanks so much. We're going to trade you at the end of the year." And that was one of the reasons why Zach was apprehensive and going back a couple weeks later when the Jets were like, "Hey, we're going back to you." He's like, "You just told me you were going to trade my ass. Now you suddenly want me back?" Like, no, I don't want to get hurt doing this. So honestly, Joe, I was a little surprised that they got what they did. I thought this was going to come down to almost cutting him, which I guess when you're paying half his salary and only going from the 7th to 6th round, that's about as best as you can get. But when you look at this, I mean, it's not a player that has all that much value. And the reasoning for it, and I've been asked this a ton by like friends and family and even just people that know Zach Wilson, like, "Oh, what are the Jets going to get from him? What are the Jets going to get from him?" Like, you take this pool of NFL teams, right? There's 31 teams that could potentially trade for him. It shrinks when you go to, okay, how many teams are actually interested in trading for a backup quarterback? It shrinks further when you think about, okay, how many of those teams are going to be interested in potentially keeping a third quarterback? Because we've seen for the last 2 years, Zach Wilson cannot be your backup. This was a Jets team with Super Bowl aspirations. Zach Wilson takes over, boom, the season's basically over. You had players saying that on Baggy Day. So that shrinks even more, because now you got to find a team that's willing to keep 3 quarterbacks. And how many teams are actually going to be willing to trade an asset for a third quarterback that might not even make the roster? So you loop in the salary, which the Jets are going to have to pay half of it. It's just it was not exactly. I know Joe Douglas deemed Zach Wilson an asset. It was not an asset that anyone really wanted. So this is officially closing the chapter. This is officially 2 sides moving on, and I think they'll both wish each other well. But it was clear that they just weren't going to. It did not work out, and now you can kind of have the argument of where Zach Wilson fits into the biggest draft busts in team history and NFL history as well. I mean, I don't know if I'd put him up there with Jamarcus Russell, but he's pretty close considering the lack of success that was on the field. And for the Jets, I know you can go with Vernon Golston, who didn't have a sack, but I mean, when you're talking about a quarterback drafted 2nd overall, that carries a little more weight in my opinion.
Yeah, I think in team history, you can make a very fair case. He is number 1 just due to the position and going that high. There's just such a bigger fallout when he was supposed to be the franchise quarterback. And yes, of course, Golston never recorded a sack. Christian Hackenberg never played, but 2nd round pick there. And, it was just that much worse than Sam Darnold, that much worse certainly than Geno Smith and Mark Sanchez. And especially even a recent memory, this will probably go down as their worst 1st round pick ever. And I know there's some ones up there historically that are a challenge. And, I don't know if I ever really see Zach settling in. Maybe best case scenario, he becomes an okay backup. But I think even kind of like Darnold, where you had some of those flashes and people were like, "Oh, look at him away from the Jets." And now it's like, yeah, he's a backup. And like maybe the Jets didn't do him any favors, but he's a backup. And I don't think Zach is as good as Darnold. So I think he's in the league for another year or 2, but I don't think this is going to be one of those ones where people are looking back and laughing at the Jets for making a mistake. And it does It seems everyone and their mother thinks the Jets are going to take Pratt on day 3 as their developmental quarterback. I'm sure other teams would like to draft him. The Jets have 2 fourth-rounders. They may get aggressive with those fourth-rounders at some point and try to move up, get a second-round pick, depending on what happens in round 1. How serious is this Pratt interest? Because he'd be the new QB3. And if it's not him, is there any other quarterbacks Jet fans should keep an eye on day 3? I feel like they're not going to take a quarterback before the 4th round, but I think they could surprise us. You never know.
Yeah, if the right guy falls, you know what I mean? I think if for some reason something weird happens with Penix, like him releasing that letter to all GMs was odd to me. Like, I don't think you release that publicly unless maybe you're starting to get some intel from your camp that he's about to slide. Now, I don't have that intel. It's just reading the tea leaves of why would you put that out there? Like, I don't understand it for the Players Tribune. Maybe Bo Nix, if he falls, same thing, into like that 3rd, 4th round area. I don't think he's going to go that far. I don't think Penix is going to go that far. But I do absolutely expect the Jets to draft a quarterback. And Pratt's the one that I've heard the name mentioned the most. And again, it's a guy that you can sit behind Aaron Rodgers for 2 years, let him learn, let him grow. And then when Aaron Rodgers rides off into the sunset, you can have him potentially take over. Worst case scenario, he's still a guy that's been groomed to be your backup and bridge quarterback to somebody that you end up drafting. You can have a little bit of a competition there. But yeah, I absolutely expect the Jets to draft a quarterback here, either on day 2 or day 3.
Round 1, let's put the potential firework aside of trading up for Marvin Harrison Jr. or Neighbors or making that big splash, which I think you flagged as a potential thing. It seems like there is some there's some chatter about this. Jeremiah, I know, has referenced it. I know a lot of fans are excited about the possibility, and I certainly do think there's a world that could happen. Let's say it doesn't. Let's say they stay at 10, or maybe they only move up 1 or 2 spots. Of these 4 guys, who is the least likely to end up being on the Jets? So I'll say Dunze, Bowers, Fatanu, and Fuaga. Of those 4, if you had to take one guy off the island and say he's probably not going to be a guy that the Jets would take in that 8 to 10, maybe they trade back a spot or 2 range, which of the 4 would you move off?
So if it were me, I would be targeting whichever is the highest ranking tackle you have on your draft board. And I know that fans want fireworks. I know that's you want the receiver, you want the tight end, but if I'm the Jets, I don't know how you go into next season with a left tackle who hasn't played a full season since 2015 and a right tackle who's 33 and showed signs of his body breaking down last year, and feel confident that you are one slip in training camp away from Max Mitchell or Carter Warren starting outside. And I've talked to people inside the Jets building who have spoken glowingly about Carter Warren. And anytime you talk about their young players, Carter Warren is always the guy they keep pushing.
Yeah.
Okay, they said the same thing about Max Mitchell last year. Max Mitchell got a shot, and it did not go well. He's just not a starting offensive tackle in the NFL right now. I know they expect that Aaron Rodgers to make things better with the offensive line because of how he can move within the pocket and protection adjustments. But again, it's a 40-year-old quarterback coming off an Achilles injury. I would be terrified if my only depth behind Smith and Moses was Mitchell and Warren. So I would draft the offensive tackle in the 1st round, have immediate insurance policy, and you're also your offensive tackle for 2025 and beyond, because, again, Moses and Smith are on their 1-year contracts. With that said, and I was talking actually Brian Costello about this in the media room, when Woody Johnson told us all offense, he's not talking about offensive tackle. He is not talking about offensive guard. He is talking about a player that the Jets are going to add who is going to put points on the scoreboard. And so for me, the kid from Washington, the receiver, I think that Rome would be one that I would keep an eye on. And then Brock Bowers, where there were several times in Joe Douglas's pre-draft press conference where unsolicited, he brought up Jeremy Ruckert and Tyler Conklin, but not in that these guys are studs, we're going to roll through them. It's like, they're not going to go down quietly if they have to fight for a starting job. Yeah. And, we still like singing their praises, but also like, we can still add to the room and do so much. He made the comment about you get the right tight end, he can be a real weapon for the offense. I have a feeling that the offensive tackles, the offensive linemen, they're going to be day 2 or day 3 potential additions, and that with that number 10 pick or by trading up, you're talking about a position where they're going to get somebody who can put points on the scoreboard as a receiver or as a tight end. I like the idea of Rome because, again, Mike Williams, you don't know what's necessarily going on. Again, you don't know when he's going to be there. They figure he'll be ready by the start of the regular season, but you don't know in training camp. Even then, how often are you going to have him? Because the way that he plays, this isn't a guy who I think is injury prone because he doesn't take care of himself. He just goes, I was talking to Dan Popper, who covers the Chargers for The Athletic, and he was basically saying, like, this is a guy who goes 110 miles per hour and gives 110% max effort on every single play. And when you treat every single play like it's your last, similar to when you watch Quincy Enunwa play for the Jets, it tends to lead to injuries because you just have that never say no, never say die. You take some extra hits and it breaks you down. I'd be worried that they're one hit away from Mike Williams having Brownlee as your starting receiver or having to rely on Alan Lazard. You know what I mean? So I would take the offensive tackles right now off the board, and I really do think that the Jets are going to go with some kind of playmaker there at 10.